Be seated. Preachers are not supposed to talk about themselves, but you're in luck. I'm going to talk a lot about myself. This is absolutely my favorite holiday, as I've said that many, many times. Even though it's a civic holiday, for me, it's a holy day. And the placement of Thanksgiving here in November's fourth Thursday does not reflect any ancient church traditions, but it's relatively new. And it's the work of a former vestry member of St. Thomas Parish in Washington, D.C. His name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He established this date as Thanksgiving in 1939. So Thanksgiving is a bit of an odd situation. We encountered a hybrid of all sorts involving elements of society and church. To complicate the matter further, it's recognized the 17th century origins of the various groups here on the North American continent. It's related to harvest festivals that were observed in Europe, as well as those kept by people of many ethnicities and religions across the face of the earth. Maybe they don't celebrate Thanksgiving the way we do, but there's an element of Thanksgiving in almost all cultures. And certainly our Thanksgiving Day can claim among its ancestors the three pilgrim feasts of the Old Testament, known as Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. These biblical feasts, along with American Thanksgiving, have agricultural significance. Yet it's a feature of historical recollection that honors the celebrating and empowering purpose that God fulfills in history. The other day, Sylvia and I were talking about how much grace there is in our backyard. We have 3 orange trees, a fig tree, a persimmon tree, and 2 lemon trees. We planted the trees and to a limited extent water them. Occasionally the orange trees get a little fertilizer, but by and large, God gives us fruit in abundance and without any significant work on our behalf. Our orange trees bear fruit from March to December. We can have fresh squeezed orange juice all that time, every day. The fig tree has 2 seasons, June and September. There are so many figs that we cannot hope to harvest them. The persimmon tree, on a good year, yields about 1,000 fuyu persimmons, and in an off year, about 700. The lemon trees haven't hit their stride yet, but my point is that God supplies grace, and we are thankful. Another thing I'm thankful for is this church family. I try to go to church every Thanksgiving Day. Sometimes that caused a good deal of angst amongst our girls as they had to indulge Dad. A highlight was attending the services at the National Cathedral when we lived in Northern Virginia. But in 2004, I wanted to go to church on Thanksgiving Day. The only service I could find in Fairfield or Vacaville was Grace Church. That was my introduction to this congregation. And here it is 22 years later, and I'm still going to Grace Church for Thanksgiving. Except this, I'm pleased to be in a different capacity now. Speaking of 22 years, yesterday was my 85th birthday. And I'm humbled to have lived 22 years longer than my father. In those 22 years, I've been ordained a priest for 16 years, I spent 3 years in seminary, 3 more years getting a master's in pastoral ministry. I served on the school board for nearly 6 years, and in the school district's bond oversight committee for 8 years. I'm proud of the things that I did, and I didn't necessarily set out to do that in those 22 years knowing what I was going to do, but that it happened. God has supplied me grace in many ways, and I am truly thankful. I hope you can reflect on your life and identify times and occasions of grace. Last Monday, Scott Stoner in his wellness compass presented a good outline for being thankful. First, he says, real gratitude is embodied, not intellectual. It moves through our whole being, physical, emotional, and spiritual. When gratitude is genuine, it shows up in our bodies, not just in our minds. Secondly, gratitude emerges from awe and wonder. Authentic gratitude comes from being thankful for the sheer gift of existence, for beauty we didn't create, and for shared good of people known and unknown to us. It's about letting ourselves be humbled by moments to remind us how extraordinary life can be. Thirdly, he says, gratitude reveals our profound interconnectedness. Almost nothing we experience comes from our efforts alone. When we trace backward from any moment of joy or beauty, we discover countless hands, seen and unseen, that made it possible. We live within an intricate web of giving and receiving that stretches across time and space. Gratitude inspires us to share. When we recognize how our experiences depend on another's care and commitment, we're inspired to become the people for others. Gratitude isn't passive. It awakens us to our role both as recipients and stewards. Stoner brings to our attention some questions to contemplate. I challenge you to consider these. First, when gratitude moved through your whole being, when has gratitude moved through your whole being, not just your mind? Describe for yourself a moment when thankfulness expressed itself physically. What does it feel like when you experience authentic gratitude versus polite thank yous? Recall a recent moment of awe and wonder. How did that experience connect you to something larger than yourself? What did that experience inspire gratitude in you? Choose one thing you're grateful for this Thanksgiving. Trace the web of interconnectedness backwards. Who made this possible? Whose work? Whose love? Whose choices? How does seeing this network of interdependence enhance your feeling of gratitude? I want to relate two Thanksgiving experiences to you that sort of traces those 3 items. The first one I had was in 1967 in Thailand. I was assigned to an air commando base in northeastern Thailand. As is the custom, the military goes all out to provide traditional Thanksgiving dinners with all the fixings in an overseas base. We reveled in that celebration, and many of us celebrated worship that day. And there's nothing quite like celebrating a uniquely American holiday in a foreign country. The Thais who worked on the base watched this peculiar celebration of thanks with amazement. They had never seen anything like this. Of course, halfway through the day, many of our air crews had to strap on their aircraft and resume their work on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, knowing that this may be their last Thanksgiving. All of us, that Thanksgiving that year was tinged with both thanks and fear. The next experience was right here in Fairfield. I'd been assigned to Travis, and once again my family indulged in my insistence that we go to a Thanksgiving service. This time it was at the First Baptist Church on Washington Street. When I came to Travis, I knew I was going to retire from the Air Force in 2 years, but the Air Force didn't know that. I wasn't happy with my career. I couldn't accomplish the things I set out for myself. The best I could do was to be in the Air Force for 4 more years. I was already a senior officer in my grade at Travis. I wasn't at all pleased with where I was and what I was to do. Frankly, I wasn't all pleased with Fairfield. As an example, our younger daughter went from a school where she could choose from 3 choirs of about 100 kids each to a school that didn't even have a music program. I sat there in the congregation and heard the words of Deuteronomy 8:17 through 18. It says, "For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land flowing with flowing streams, with waters and underground waters welling up in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of figs, of vines and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you might eat bread without scarcity, where you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and from whose hills you may mine copper. You shall eat your fill, and bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you." I almost broke down in tears. I realized that God had plunked me down in a place that was pretty much described like what God had promised Israel. Who was I to challenge what God had given me? But the Deuteronomy passage doesn't stop there. It goes on to say, "Take care that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments, his ordinances, his statutes, which I am commanding you today." I heard that last phase of the sentence so loudly it resounded in my ears, "which I am commanding you today." As a military person, I thought that this whole section was a command and a very serious warning. But the Deuteronomy passage doesn't stop there. It goes on to say, "Remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, so that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to his ancestors, as he is doing today." I heard that last phrase of the sentence so loud it resounded in my ears also. As he is doing today. I guess that has put me somewhat where I am right now. Reflect back on your experiences of Thanksgiving. Remember that over time and be thankful. Amen.